What's going on, people? You know what time it is. Another episode of the HeatCheck. I'm your host, of course, Jaydee Dyer. And look, the playoffs are in more than full swing because we've had everything in terms of upsets, we've had sweeps, and we've had tightly contested competition. But one thing we've definitely had is intense every single night action. Now, of course, I'm going to bring in my guys who, of course, accompany me here on the HeatCheck. You know, it's the three-time NBA Champion BJ Armstrong, and none other than the Hoop Genius Mo Mooncey. But I don't understand why you blacked out, bro. Oh, here we go.
If you know, you know. I've been waiting for this one, fellas. I've been waiting for this one.
I'm just going to say
Jaydee,
that's the smartest. That's the smartest I've seen him dress all year. Yeah, and I know that there's a pair of Jordans. I know there's a pair of Jordans on your feet right now as well. Yeah, alongside the drip.
Hey, Mo, can I ask you one question? Mo, can you tell us the vibe?
BJ, you know the vibes.
Honestly, sometimes.
Who is this character? Who is this character?
Sometimes, BJ, you need to go. We need to get you on Twitter. We need to show you this character. I know exactly who Mo is. I know exactly who Mo is trying to be right now. I give him credit. Look, it's good. It's good. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to serve this next segment to you in 3 courses. We're going to deal with the starters, first of all, before we get to the main event. So when we're talking about the starters, let's discuss what actually did go down in that Boston versus Brooklyn series, and let's discuss it from the Brooklyn angle. You've seen Steve Nash already turn around and say they turned over the ball too much. You've seen Blake Griffin say they didn't have the right spirit to gel and be a cohesive unit. Kyrie Irving admitting his mistakes in terms of not giving his team their full attention, and Kevin Durant saying he's looking forward to next season to re-up. But fundamentally, this is Kevin Durant's team at this moment in time. And you still have to think, when you look at it all over, top to bottom, Mo, I can't help but think that Kevin Durant must have an element of regret when you leave the Golden State Warriors to this mess that he finds himself right now in Brooklyn.
I mean, Kevin Durant is one of the greatest players we've ever seen. You know, at this point, I don't think he's got a lot left to prove, but there are going to be questions asked about his resume in terms of being able to win an NBA title without Stephen Curry on his team. It's very interesting if you want to go down that path. I personally believe that those titles don't define the greatness of a player, and Kevin Durant is an all-time great with or without an NBA title, but it is pretty interesting how he's been struggling with the decisions that he made. You know, he wanted his own team, and he thought Kyrie was the guy to go with. I'm sure we'll talk about Kyrie Irving later on, but Kyrie is clearly not the guy that you want to go with. LeBron tried to warn you when you want to leave LeBron James in his prime. That's a warning sign to me that something's not quite right. Because if you want to leave LeBron in his prime, that's all types of crazy. Because I know every player in the NBA wants to play with LeBron James. But anyway, if you're talking about the biggest mistakes that Kevin Durant has made, I noticed our good friend is not here today. You know, our good friend who was on this show 2 weeks ago, the one who said I was insane and crazy for telling you the Boston Celtics would win this series with ease. Now, I think the biggest mistake Kevin Durant made was following our good friend on Instagram, because ever since then, he's been blindly defending him, oblivious to the realities of what we've seen in the NBA this season. Because what we saw in that first round was a first-class whooping of the Brooklyn Nets. And if you had been watching the NBA season since January, you would have been aware to the fact that that Boston Celtics defense is relentless. If you'd been watching the games, you would know that Jason Tatum is a bona fide superstar in this league, a two-way player. You'd be aware that Kyrie Irving wasn't really playing much this season. If you've been watching the games for Brooklyn, you'd be aware that Kevin Durant was playing 40-plus minutes against the likes of the Indiana Pacers and the Houston Rockets, with all due respect to them, just to close out the season. If you've been watching the games, you'd know that the number one defense in the NBA would not be troubled by a team that required the playing games to get to the playoffs. So no, I'm not surprised by this. Kevin Durant has got a lot to think about this summer. I don't know about the Ben Simmons situation. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I think a lot of mistakes have been made. And the number one mistake was calling me crazy, because there was someone on this show that wanted to bet their house on the Brooklyn Nets advancing. Now, they must be lucky that I'm guided by Islam and I do not gamble. Otherwise, certain people would be homeless right now. Let's think about that.
BJ, the reason, and I cited back in, let's think, 2018, 2017, that Kevin Durant started talking about the infamous move to Golden State, was the style of basketball and the organization structure. I remember those words very specifically, and turning around and saying that was a major key component in that move. Now I start thinking back, wow. Talking about dysfunction, you're talking about unstructured. That's everything that the Brooklyn Nets are at this moment in time. So where does that leave you in terms of looking at KD's overall decisions to leave that structure and then come to this dysfunction?
You know, every player has the right to choose and, you know, do what they feel is best for their career at any given moment, especially when they reach free agency. So I don't have a problem with the decisions that he make, right? You know, there were people out there were criticizing him for making the decision when he decided to leave Oklahoma to go to Golden State. And now they're going to be criticized. That's part of the game. However, you know, if there is a silver lining here, is I'll give Brooklyn credit for this. They said all the right things after the game. All the right things were said, right? KD said, "Don't feel sorry for us over spilled milk." I think that's what his, you know, quote was. Kyrie said the right things. Coach Nash said the right things. And now what they're saying behind closed doors, hey, that's between them. When you are talking about winning a championship, okay, that's not easy. When you're winning in this league, that's not easy. And to think that we're just going to put together a group and these guys are just going to come together and just win because of what they did yesterday, that's not how it really works here. Now, I know it's fun. The Brooklyn Nets, myself included, they piqued my interest. I was really interested to see if it was possible. And as we can see, it's much more difficult. Okay. I say this quite often. Roster construction is a skill. When you look at this team, the Brooklyn Nets, clearly they have some gaps on the construction of the team. However, those two players, Kevin Durant and Kyrie, they give you hope. We know they are terrific offensive players. But right now, they're not a complete team that can compete at the highest level. And give the Boston Celtics credit. They showed the difference between a team that compete at the highest level because of the construction of a team. And it takes time. And give those guys Boston credit. They were just a better team in this series. And now we move on.
Well, BJ, you know, it goes back to what I said 2 weeks ago before the series began. Everyone loves to talk about defense wins championships, but when it came to predicting this series, everyone thought that the Hezzy tween cross in his bag would somehow prevail over 5 players that play great defense on the defensive side of the ball. And what was astounding to me in that closeout game, as much as Kevin Durant struggled through that series because the defense paid attention to him, Jason Tatum, Grant Williams, Al Horford did fantastic jobs defending Kevin Durant like we've never seen before, probably since the grit and grind Grizzlies put the clamps on him back in the Western Conference. But what really stood out to me in that final game of the series, you know, season on the line in your home arena, it wasn't the fact that Kyrie Irving was getting booed on his home court or Jason Tatum was getting MVP chance in Brooklyn. What stood out to me was that the second star on the Brooklyn Nets was Goran Dragic. Kyrie Irving didn't show up. And there was one play in particular that really stood out to me. At halftime in game 4, it was kind of close. And there was 1.4 seconds left on the clock. They inbounded the ball to Kyrie Irving, and he simply chose to hold the ball, drop it, and then walk to the locker room. Not even attempt a full court heave. I don't know what you're trying to save your shooting percentage for, but that really stood out to me because if you hit that long-range 3 from full court, we know Kyrie Irving's a magician with the basketball. He's more than capable of doing it. You hit that, or even get close, it gets the crowd on their feet. It gets them excited, the oohs, the ahs. It gives a little burst of life into that team, and you can make a run in the second half. But the fact that he caught the ball, dropped on the floor, those boys were ready to go home after Jason Tatum put the dagger in them in game 1.
BJ, I'm just looking at the overall picture, and you know I hate to turn around and compare players and compare eras. Everybody's great in their own mind. To make it to the NBA full stop, you're a great player. But where does this leave Kevin Durant? Because he is in that upper echelons of great players. And some people have turned around and wanted to suggest he has the potential and the skill set to go down as one of the all-time greats. So does this affect his legacy?
You know, we love to make these statements. He's in the middle of his career, okay? If he goes out and he wins the next 2 championships, are we really going to say this affects his legacy? Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. You know, we know what type of player he is, and we know what he's capable of doing. However, I think when you look at the series, it must be said, and it must be said here. They have to get better. Kevin Durant is the best player on that team. No doubt about it. And he understands if they're going to win the ultimate goal, he has to be better. Okay? He didn't have a good series for whatever the reason may have been. But certainly, if you take a poll amongst players and executives in this league and coaches, no one's turning down Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. But he has to be better and play at a more consistent level so that you don't have those, lapses like you saw in this series. And they're going to have to improve their roster. No doubt about it. In particular, and Mo is correct on the defensive end. This team here has gaps. They have holes they have to fill. Now, I know they had some injuries, some things that they probably wish they could take back. And more of those things is getting all their players healthy on the floor. So Kevin Durant will be the best player. Kevin Durant will come back, and then we'll see what happens. But certainly that does not excuse what we saw there. Boston was the better team. Boston was able to show you the weaknesses of their roster, the weakness of the individual players, the weaknesses of the team, and they were the best player, and they deserve all the credit.
Talking of players that maybe haven't put their best foot forward this year, let's discuss probably the biggest soap opera in the NBA at this moment in time, and that's the Ben Simmons saga, because it still continues. It can't stop, won't stop, as Diddy would say. Yeah, no matter which way Brooklyn Nets turned, this will not go away because we are still awaiting his debut with the Brooklyn Nets. Look, we've seen the conversations this week between Rich Paul and Sean Marks, of course, the general manager for the Nets at this moment in time, to discuss the overall situation. And it was reported that Ben Simmons wanted to play at some point in this series, but whether it was physical or it was mental, we still are awaiting his debut. Mo, where does this leave the Nets and Ben Simmons relationship today after their exit, especially going forward into next season now?
I feel bad for Ben Simmons because it's clear he wasn't going to play this season. We all knew it. I told you 2 weeks ago he's going to be sitting on the sidelines and watching this series as a spectator. I know he had some flashy outfits and it was great, but he wasn't going to play. And I feel bad for him because whoever was leaking to the media that he was supposedly going to play in game 4, game 5, or whatever game it was, has done him a disservice because there was no way that Ben Simmons was coming back to a team that's already 3-0 down to become the first player to be eliminated in back-to-back NBA games. So whoever it was from the Nets organization, from his camp, whatever it was, telling people that he's going to come back, he's not Superman. He's not going to save you. Because let's think about it like this, as great of a defender as he is, when he was playing in Philadelphia, he had Joel Embiid protecting the rim, and he had Matisse Thybulle also alongside him guarding the perimeter. In Brooklyn, he's not going to save the entire team. He's just one man. One man can't save an entire defense, can't make up for all the other players on the court. And then offensively, we saw Nick Claxton. He started the game 0 from 10 from the free throw line. Do you really want to bring Ben Simmons back in? Because if he comes back into the game, the other team's going to intentionally foul him, make him shoot the free throws, and it's the same song and the same dance. He's in a tough spot. I hope his injuries get better. I hope he can prove himself to be an NBA player and continue to play in this league. However, at this point, after what we've seen throughout his time in Philadelphia, throughout his time in Brooklyn so far, I'm not sure when we're going to see Ben Simmons back on the court. I hope for his sake that we do see him to start next season and his back heels. But what I've seen has been abysmal handling from the Nets organization we're going to bring him back. Oh, no, we're not. We're going to bring him back. Oh, no, we're not. That's just unfair to the kid. If he's injured, let him be injured. If he's struggling with his mental health, let him struggle. Don't let him struggle, but, be aware of that and don't put him under the pressure of having to come back and play game 4 because there was no way he was going to come back. And to suggest that was ludicrous and irresponsible from the Nets organization.
Well, Mo, there's a lot to unfold and a lot to unpack here. And, until you stepped in someone's shoes and you know what's going on. So, what we see out in public, we can only comment on. And there's a lot to unpack and there's a lot to have been said. And for whatever the reasons may be why he's not playing. And then that's just what we know. Working in an organization, I also know there's things that you haven't seen that you don't know. And those are the things that I'm concerned about because there's something that's not allowing this young man to get out there and play. And I have to take him and the team at face value for whatever those reasons may be. However, it's one thing that I've learned because I talk to a lot of people in this league, executives, owners, players, so forth and so on. And this is the first time that I can recall in my adult life hear of the following. All generations, my generation, this new generation, the younger people who are watching it, all of the generations finally can agree on one thing. Whatever is going on with Ben Simmons, it's not a good look. And this is the first time that I think everyone is saying, okay, what is going on, not just with Ben Simmons, but the overall, what is the effect on this league now? Because right now, when we're seeing players not playing for whatever the reason may be, okay, and I'm sure at some point we will find out exactly what is going on. And so we're forced to, whether we believe it or not, to take him and the team at their face value of what is going on. But I will say this. Everyone agrees this is not a good look right now for the NBA. And right now, what are we going to do about this moving forward?
I mean, you make a great point there, BJ, and I just want you to double up on that. When you say it's not a good look, because we see the collective bargaining agreement that the owners are going to turn around and bring in, which is the financial incentive. But then there's been the overall conversations that we've had in the background around load management and pampering these players in comparison to your generation. What do you mean when you turn around and talk about the overall look not being exactly where we want it at this moment?
Well, this league is about one thing. It's about performance. Okay. I agree with, if people need rest, hey, load manage. Okay. It's a unfamiliar in our generation, but hey, it is what it is. This is where we're at now, for whatever reason that may have been. But what we do know is the following. We have to perform when the lights are on. Because if we don't, this league is going to go in a direction that is going to affect all of us, business-wise, playing-wise, and all of the other things. So we have to really have a heart-to-heart conversation as a league, all right? The Players Association, the players, the owners, and figure out what's the delicate balance here, because when our star players aren't playing, and performing, when the lights come on, suddenly now we have a problem. And I think that's something we have to take into consideration. And that's the one thing all of us can agree on.
Now, I just want to say this last thing about Ben Simmons here. Now, I don't know the insides of his situation, but I want to end it with this. With regards to his injury, if he's injured and he doesn't want to play, he doesn't feel healthy, that's completely fair enough. He's well within his right to do that. But I just want to take this moment to respect the great players who have sacrificed their body and played through injuries. The late, great Kobe Bryant was shooting free throws with a torn Achilles, playing through broken fingers, broken noses, all types of injuries. Rajon Rondo dislocated his elbow in the middle of a game, continued to play the rest of that playoff game. Larry Bird damn near broke his back towards the end of his career, trying to continue playing for the Boston Celtics. So I want to show some respect to them. And then, of course, the topic of mental health is a very sensitive one. So I just want to take this time to give a shout out to players like Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan, who have been open about their battles of mental health and continue to come out and put on a show for their fans who pay money to come and see them do what they do. And I want to give a shout out to everyone who's watching this, who may be struggling in their own life with their own health and their own mental health, but has to push through and doesn't have the luxury of sitting at home and being a millionaire and skipping work. And you have to turn up to work every day, no matter what demons you're battling. I just want to say to everyone watching this, I salute you, I see you, and keep going.
Well put, Mo. No two ways about it. Let's discuss the Nets in terms of this exit, because this is the first time in the playoffs in 17 years, and BJ was just alluding to it. The superstars of yesterday might not be the superstars of today, because there is no Kevin Durant or LeBron James for the first time in the second round in 17 years. But I want to take it back. 3 years ago, when we saw this script, it seemed almost certain, right? You turn around and think about it. 3 superstars, all have done wonderful things in this league. Incredible ball handlers, incredible offensive wizards, multiple championships. This Brooklyn super team seemed like it had everything. The thing they didn't take account for was the drama that comes with it, because it's been enough to fill up probably every part of Love and Hip Hop on every element of the United States of America. And I'm sick and tired of it at this stage. We need to weigh it up and let's just lock it in. But BJ loves to talk about roster construction. So BJ, I'm going to bring this one to you, right? Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant, they're locked in. Patty Mills, Kyrie Irving, we know they have player options. Steph Curry, Joe Harris, we know that they're still under contract as well. How much is this Nets team going to change going forward, and where do they go from here?
Man, great question. If I look at their roster right now, I'm saying the first thing they have to do is they have to get size. Okay, you can't keep going out there with Seth Curry, and I really like Seth Curry and Bruce Brown and those players. Nick Claxton, even though he's tall, he's not big. Okay, you have to be able to play, and your starters in particular, they got to have girth. You can see the physicality of the game gets heightened once we get to the playoffs. So the first thing I would do is make sure that we are a big team, right? If you have Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant, okay, that should be your 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 or whatever, however you want to size it, all right? I'm going to assume that Kyrie Irving is back. So if you have Kyrie Irving at the 1, let's say Ben Simmons at the 2, Kevin Durant at the 3, all right? Or you can elect to have Joe Harris there. So let's just say you have those 4 players, Kyrie, Joe Harris, Ben Simmons, and Kevin Durant. And you need defense, activity level. The one thing that really bothered me in this whole series is when you watch the game, right? We can watch the stats and we can point to all of those things. But the activity level of the Boston Celtics, when you compared it to the activity level of the Brooklyn Nets, that really bothered me. Activity, second effort points, second effort rebounds, block shots, loose balls. Was there any doubt who was going to get all of the 50-50 balls in this series? Was there any doubt who was going to take all of the charges and do all of the things necessary to win in this series? So I would make sure that I include or identify players that's going to give me all of the second effort and all of the hustle plays, which we call winning plays, if you're going to surround this team with the talent that they have and they elect to bring those guys back.
Well, BJ, I think there was some doubt because there were a lot of people who doubted who'd win this series, but we're going to leave that behind. Let's look ahead to next season where the Boston Celtics have their current roster under contract through the great GM work of Mr. Brad Stevens and the great drafting of Mr. Danny Ainge, who deserves a lot of credit for this team. Whereas the Brooklyn Nets, next season, the salary cap is looking like it's going to be $122 million with the luxury tax being around $149 million. The Brooklyn Nets already have $156 million in salary committed. And that is without a few key contributors. As we said, the second best player yesterday was Goran Dragic down the stretch. He's a free agent next year. I think he's going to want to go to Dallas and play with that wonder boy Luka Doncic. Bruce Brown, their top scorer and their most impactful offensive option when the defense is clamping down KD, he's a free agent, and that boy is going to get paid because he can play defense and he's proved himself versatile enough to be a useful offensive option. So they're going to lose 2 key contributors. Add to that, Blake Griffin, expiring contract. Nick Claxton, expiring contract. Andre Drummond, whether you think he's going to make a difference or not, is an expiring contract. So they're going to be looking to add players, but the only players they can add is maybe 1 or 2 by splitting up the mid-level, and then they're going to be looking for veteran minimum guys because they constructed this team by thinking the superstars plus a few veteran players added to their roster, much like the other team in LA. They thought that would be enough. They thought we're going to get 2 or 3 superstars and we're going to get a bunch of minimum guys, put them in a team, and it's going to work. Well, guess what? It takes more than 2 or 3 players to win an NBA championship. It takes an entire team. So when you're looking at the roster construction and we're talking about this, I think some changes are going to have to be made if they're going to try and run this back because the Eastern Conference is going to be better. The Celtics are looking dominant. The Milwaukee Bucks, the reigning champions, are looking dominant. The Miami Heat are looking dominant. The Philadelphia 76ers, they're going to be better next season than they are right now. And then you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers when they get healthy. They're going to be even better. The Atlanta Hawks, they can't be any worse than they were this season. All the teams in the Eastern Conference, and I'm sure there's a few more to mention, are going to be stronger. Maybe the Brooklyn Nets title window has closed already and we don't even know it.
Including the Orlando Magic.
Well,
I know the Orlando Magic.
No, JD, let's not go too far.
The Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic will be stronger as well. Yeah, the Orlando Magic will be stronger as well.
They will be stronger. They can't get any weaker.
I just want to, BJ, I just want to push your attention towards something really quickly before we move on from this subject. And that's the future of Steve Nash. Because I've seen KD double down in his closing interview and turn around and say he still thinks that Steve Nash is the head coach to lead this franchise. Do you believe that at this moment in time?
Well, I think with this group and what they've gone through, right, without making excuses for them, you know, he's had to endure. When I say he, Coach Steve Nash has had to endure an incomplete roster. All right, to his, you know, that's just a fact. All right, Kyrie has missed. James Harden came and went. You know, the kid Ben Simmons never gets on the floor. Joe Harris is not there. LaMarcus Aldridge and those guys aren't playing. So to his defense, all right, he's had to figure out how to juggle all of this, just like everyone else. However, I do think of the following. I think he knows this. I think the team knows this, that they all have to be better. Okay. And that better has to be with the best ability right now is availability. Joe Harris in particular and Ben Simmons are going to have to be available. And I think once we get those players available and we have some level of consistency, we can actually give him a fair assessment. Now, what we do know in professional sports, there's no such thing as fair. But I think right now they have to be prepared. They're going to all have to be better. And I think that's fair criticism. So I do think he should come back. I do think they have to get their entire roster. I do think they have to give themselves an opportunity. But that's easier said than done. And right now, until we can have a full evaluation and saying, who is this team? Everyone's going to have to say the following. We're going to see this entire team on the roster healthy, ready to play and be consistent. At least give them 15 to 18 games or 20 games before we say this is who they really are.
Mo, does Steve Nash return next year?
If he has the support of Kevin Durant, and more importantly, if he has the support of the ownership group, then he will be returning as the coach. You know, he was hired when he was recommended by Kevin Durant. And what stands out to me, though, is the comments that go back to Kyrie Irving at the start of the season saying that he feels like they don't need a coach. And then his post-game comments after the Game 4 loss last night in Brooklyn, where he said, me, Kevin, Sean, and Joe, referring to Sean and Joe being the general manager and the owner of the organization. We're in this together and we're going to figure this out. I don't know how I feel about those comments if I'm the head coach. I don't know. We're going to have to see what happens. I'm going to keep it 100 with you guys. Steve Nash did not do a good job coaching this series. Ime Udoka thoroughly outcoached him. The Boston Celtics players thoroughly outpaid them. Tatum thoroughly stepped up as the best small forward aside from Giannis Antetokounmpo in the NBA right now.